guys, so still working on this thing and getting better, but I recently had a thought idea regarding the whole Star Wars and Disney situation. So it's common to see in YouTube, or if you're a Star Wars fan, how basically most of the Star Wars audience converted into a YouTube audience that just watches people criticize the movies that they don't like. And I thought that was kind of interesting in the fact that when you really break it down, Disney represents the empire, right, from the original films, and in a symbolical way, even George Lucas talked about this, how in the original trilogy he didn't want to give power to a studio, so he ended up making his own studio.
They didn't. The studio executives generally are not the most sophisticated people in the world. And you will find that if you go to Hollywood. I hope you don't, because you don't want to be oppressed by people who are not as smart as you are.
Because he didn't want them interfering with his story, because he knew that they had agendas, they had quotas, they had general stuff that doesn't correlate with storytelling. So I thought it was very confusing when you really retroactively look at his decision to sell the Star Wars IP to Disney. And that made me think that, in a way, I think George Lucas knew that Disney wouldn't fundamentally understand the IP. And now, in the modern day, the Star Wars IP isn't really seen as all that impactful or all that important, because over the years, Disney took that IP and slowly destroyed it with that quality output. And even regardless of the themes that was Star Wars is a very simple story about good and evil. But now in modern days, as we're trying to recreate these movies and stuff, Disney's increasingly showing a discontent to the old Star Wars fans, the old people that brought up the IP, and is catering to a new audience that they're trying to generate. And that audience isn't as massive as the cultural cachet that Star Wars used to have. So now it's like, I have this mind theory that I think George Lucas did this on purpose, because to some extent he recognized that as fans, and having watched his stories and what he believed in, the idea of bureaucracy and governments and tyranny, I think he recognized that as soon as he gave the IP over to Disney and he would give up his creative control, he practically knew that in his mind it was the end of his Star Wars. And I do know that he had he had a script written for the sequels, and in my mind the story, if done correctly, should have been the prequels, the originals, and the sequels by George Lucas, as Star Wars is supposed to be that family lineage of the Skywalkers. It's the centerpiece for the whole universe. But I think in his mind, he saw that once he gave the control over to Disney, it was ceased being his IP. And so once you have the prequels and the sequels, that is what encapsulates original Star Wars. And the extended universe is what the fans of that IP generated from their love. And I think that this is an interesting situation where you basically have the market, the free market, and the people that own the IP are in completely different sets, because the free market, in their mind, they have this idea of Star Wars that ended and is composed of the extended universe, and basically the Disney only comes in to really just give us key jingles for us to see old characters. And I think it's very representative of what Disney decided to do with the original characters, which was slowly kill them over the course of the sequels. And that's telling. But more telling is this point of the empire versus the fans, right? And I think that it's kind of fitting that a whole franchise about Republic revolution is now being fought in the real world via YouTube videos and YouTube commentary, and how old media is a stand-in for the empire for us as they're trying to push their ideas through the battlegrounds of Star Wars, the IP that we all fall in love with. But us recognizing that their values are antithetical to the original Star Wars, it's almost as if the old Republic became the Empire, and we as the fans make up the Jedi. And it kind of sounds dorky, but in a way, we're fighting that Empire takeover. And it's, I don't know, it brings me some type of joy to think that somehow, some way, George Lucas managed to take this idea of revolution and sort of created a situation in the real world where you would have similar ideas take place, and it's almost like the art was influencing the real world almost, because he brought these ideas and then paradoxically gave that up to Disney. And I think that is something that we need to keep in mind when we see what Star Wars is doing right now, and acknowledge that George Lucas already did his work, and his work was completed when the sequels were completed, the prequels were completed. And nowadays, Star Wars isn't really Star Wars. It's the Empire. It's the Empire taking over and using the IP for its most shallow characters and surface level things, when in reality Star Wars stands in the themes and the ideology and the fight of good and evil. And that's Star Wars. Star Wars. It's a war between good and evil in space. That's why it's in the stars. But now we have our Star Wars in the world via our ideologies versus, bureaucracy. And so we as fans need to stand up for that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But yeah, most of my Star Wars content nowadays comes from consuming YouTube content about Star Wars, because that's the best Star Wars content by default. But that's all for the video. I wanted to try a more loose thought video, because I mince my words when I have the scripts, and I'm still working my way through it. Maybe a combination of both. But if you like what you're seeing, I hope it gets better. I'm trying. Capitalism, real world things prevent me from putting all my energy into this, but this is what I believe is my art. So yeah, like and subscribe, and leave a comment if anything enters your mind. Thank you.